Let me tell you something most people won't. Just because someone makes a lot of money doesn't mean they're winning with money. In fact, a shocking number of people making six figures, even 200 or 300 grand a year, still live paycheck to paycheck. They're stressed, they're in debt, and honestly, many of them are just one emergency away from disaster. If you don't learn how to manage money when you have a little, you'll just scale your stress when you have a lot. So if you're praying for more, working hard for more, and waiting on a financial breakthrough, you need to watch this video now. Because you know success without wisdom will leave you broke at a higher level. Let's talk about the habits, mindsets, and spiritual shifts you need to make now, so when the overflow comes, you don't waste it. Welcome to Flourish in Wealth, where financial freedom begins. Let's start with the Henrys. By Henry, I mean high earners, not rich yet. These are people who make good money, really good money, six figures, double what their parents made. But they still feel broke, still anxious, still hustling like they're barely getting by. And here's the twist, a lot of them are believers. They tithe, they serve, they post scripture on Instagram, but they're one unexpected bill away from breakdown. One lost paycheck from panic. Why? Because income doesn't equal wealth, and salary doesn't equal peace. You can be a high earner and still spiritually and financially insecure. Here's what nobody tells you. The more money you make without spiritual alignment, the faster you build a life that looks blessed but feels burdensome. More bills, more responsibility, more pressure to perform. You're not just paying for rent. You're paying for image, for approval, for the lifestyle you think you're supposed to have now that you've arrived. And you know, many Christians get caught in this exact trap. Not because they're greedy, but honestly because they're unguarded. They start measuring success by worldly standards instead of kingdom truth. And little by little, they trade peace for pressure, stewardship for status, overflow for overwork. But the Bible saw this coming. Ecclesiastes chapter 5 verse 10 says, "Whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This too is meaningless." That's the Henry life. You're making more than you ever imagined, but you still feel like it's not enough. And here's the scary part. This trap doesn't start when you hit six figures. It starts when your mindset isn't ready for increase. Because if your values don't grow with your income, your problems will. And that's the problem with being a Henry. You look blessed on the outside, but you're quietly burning out on the inside. So what's causing it? Why does making more still feel like less? Because there's a trap that's even deeper than burnout. It's the illusion of more, and it's stealing your joy, your margin, and your sense of abundance. Let's go there. You'd think making 100 grand or 200 grand would fix everything, right? No more stress, no more overdrafts, just peace and freedom. But here's what the numbers say, and they're sobering. Most Americans, no matter how much they make, say they need double their income just to feel, well, comfortable. Someone earning $50,000 says they'd feel good at 100,000. But someone earning 100,000? They say 200,000. And the person at 200,000 is already eyeing 400,000. That's not income progression, that's financial deception. It's the lie that just a little more will finally make you whole. But more never delivers what it promises. Because when you live in the illusion of more, you're never present, you're never content, you're never grateful, you're always chasing, always striving, always waiting to feel rich, but never quite getting there. This is why the world, stays anxious, and why so many believers end up feeling frustrated with God. Because deep down we bought into the myth that peace comes with a paycheck. We started to think that overflow comes from income, not alignment. But Jesus, he really shut that down. In Luke chapter 12, verse 15, he said, "Beware, guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own." That's not just a financial tip, that's a kingdom warning, because honestly, if the devil can't trap you with poverty, he'll trap you with pursuit. You'll just keep running after the next level, thinking that's when you'll finally rest. But rest is actually a fruit of wisdom, not of wealth. And what feeds this illusion the most? Let's talk about that next. Comparison will keep you broke at any level. Comparison is one of the most subtle but brutal financial traps believers fall into. It doesn't start with jealousy, it starts with observation. You see someone on Instagram buying their second property. Your friend at church just upgraded to a luxury SUV. A colleague your age is traveling business class with their family, and suddenly what God gave you feels, small. That's how it begins, quiet, innocent. But it grows fast. Before long, you're no longer grateful, you're measuring, not stewarding, competing. Not asking God for direction, but chasing what someone else already has. And here's the catch, the person you're comparing yourself to is probably comparing themselves to someone else. It's a cycle with no finish line. And if you're not careful, you'll start spending like them just to feel like you're not behind. That's how debt starts. That's how lifestyle creep sneaks in. That's how tithes get skipped and savings get drained, all in the name of catching up to a life God never called you to copy. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 12 says, "But they are only comparing themselves with each other, using themselves as the standard of measurement." How ignorant. You weren't called to match anyone, you were called to multiply what God gave you. If you're always measuring your progress by someone else's highlight reel, you'll never feel like you're enough. That's what keeps Henrys trapped. They're not just living, they're performing. So before you blame your income for why you're stressed, pause. Because the real issue might not be how much you make, it might be how much you mimic. Let's dig into what happens when the pressure to keep up starts reshaping your priorities, even when you don't notice it. But before that, if you're tracking with me, please go to the comment section below and say, "Enough is enough." Let me know you're with me on this journey to financial peace, not financial pressure. All right, let's talk about the next point. Peer pressure in disguise. Let's call it what it is. Not all pressure looks like sin. Sometimes it shows up as opportunity. You start earning more, and without even realizing it, your circle shifts. You're invited into new rooms, nicer restaurants, bigger gatherings, and suddenly your normal begins to stretch. Where you used to see luxury, you now see standard. A $70 dinner, normal. Designer shoes, reasonable. First-class flights, deserved. You're not flaunting anything, you're just, adjusting, but slowly and kind of silently, your financial baseline starts rising. Not because of purpose, but simply because of proximity. And here's where believers get caught. You think you're being blessed, but really you're just being pressured. Not by the enemy, but actually by your environment. Because when your environment elevates faster than your convictions, you start mistaking cultural expectations for God's provision. You stop asking, "Lord, is this wise?" And you start thinking, well, everyone around me is doing it. But that's not stewardship, that's silent conformity. Romans chapter 12, verse 2 says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." You can't follow Christ and chase culture at the same time. You can't steward well if you're always spending to stay relevant. So before you call it a blessing, ask yourself, did God lead me here, or did my circle raise the thermostat and I didn't notice? Because here's the thing, peer pressure doesn't just change how you spend, it changes what you believe you deserve. And when that belief meets your next pay raise, you don't build wealth, you build weight. Lifestyle creep is next. This is when your income goes up and, well, your expenses just sort of rise right along with it. You finally get a raise and suddenly that old beat-up Toyota just doesn't feel right anymore. You're not splurging, you're just, upgrading. Your old apartment, it feels too small. Your phone, outdated. And your wardrobe, well, you reckon it's time to look the part. And listen, there's nothing wrong with wanting nicer things. The danger is when every single increase in income leads to an increase in consumption, but no real increase in savings, giving, investing, or peace of mind. That's what we call lifestyle creep. It's when your expenses just keep pace with your income, and eventually they overtake it. Your paycheck might look stronger, but your margin just disappears. And instead of building wealth, you're really just building a more expensive version of stress. You work harder, you earn more, but somehow you just feel tighter than you did before. Why is that? Well, it's because abundance without discipline creates pressure, plain and simple. And honestly, pressure disguised as prosperity will always leave you empty. Proverbs chapter 21, verse 17 says, "Those who love pleasure become poor. Those who love wine and luxury will never be rich." Now, that verse doesn't demonize enjoyment, not at all. It just warns against, unchecked upgrades. Because every financial level comes with choices. You can reward yourself for the work, or you can position yourself for freedom. But you can't do both, not at the same time. So now you're making more, spending more, and feeling less peace than ever. Let me ask you this, what's the point of earning six figures if you still wake up tired, worried, and unable to breathe? Let's talk about the myth that money will solve your exhaustion, and why so many believers are still burnt out, even in abundance. High income doesn't erase burnout. More money doesn't mean more rest. Many Henrys are just exhausted. They work non-stop, not because they really want to, but because, well, they just can't afford to stop. A bigger paycheck doesn't come with more peace. Actually, it often comes with a heavier price tag, and not just financially, but emotionally, spiritually, and physically too. You probably imagined that once the money started rolling in, life would finally slow down. You'd get to rest, take that vacation, sleep better, and just breathe a bit easier. But instead, the opposite happened. You earn more, but you work longer. You live in a nicer house, but you never enjoy it. You've leveled up on paper, but your soul feels worn out. This is the trap that many believers fall into, because they didn't realize that more money doesn't remove the need for margin. In fact, more money usually multiplies whatever is already in your life, including your stress. Let's be honest, some Christians are secretly afraid to slow down. They're scared that if they rest, everything will collapse. They say they trust God, but their calendar says they trust hustle. And let's not forget the pressure to keep up appearances. You've got the income now, so people expect a certain lifestyle. You feel like you have to maintain the image, keep up the grind, pay for the upgrades. And suddenly, you're not just working for your needs, you're working to fund your reputation. But what's the point of making $200,000 if your health is deteriorating, your relationships are falling apart, and your joy is gone? Matthew 11 verse 28 says this, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." That wasn't a suggestion, it was an invitation. Rest is not a reward for the rich, it's a right for the redeemed. If the lifestyle you're building requires you to stay exhausted, anxious, and on edge, it's not from God. God's blessings add no sorrow. And if your increase is causing burnout, you might be growing in the wrong direction. So don't confuse momentum with grace. Busyness isn't the same as fruitfulness, and exhaustion is not a badge of faithfulness. And here's the thing, the burnout isn't just from doing too much. Sometimes it's from feeling too much. Because you're not just spending money, you're trying to buy relief, validation, even identity. Let's talk about what really drives most people's financial decisions and why, until you master it, money will always rule your peace. Money is emotional. When you feel tired, stressed, or overwhelmed, spending gives you a quick high. But that quick fix can destroy your future. Your money habits are not just practical. 99% of the time they're emotional. You're not swiping your card for necessities, you're swiping it for relief. You're not just upgrading your lifestyle, you're upgrading your mood. You're not spending $200 on dinner because you need it. You're doing it because it makes you feel in control, if only for a moment. Let's be real, a lot of the time we're not buying things, we're buying a feeling of joy, escape, power, approval, or comfort. It's therapy with a receipt. And because it doesn't look like sin, we justify it. I've had a long week, I deserve this. Or I'm overwhelmed, I just need a break. Sometimes we tell ourselves, it's not that deep, I'm treating myself. But here's what no one tells you. Those little emotional decisions, they stack up like bricks, one by one, quietly, until, well, they build a wall that blocks you from financial freedom. You're praying for increase, but emotionally leaking every dollar God sends your way. You're tithing, budgeting, and declaring breakthrough, but your Amazon cart is honestly undoing your prayers behind the scenes. Like a city whose walls are broken through is a person who lacks self-control. When you don't manage your emotions, your financial life has no walls, no guardrails, no defense. You're vulnerable to every feeling that shows up in your day, sadness, boredom, anxiety, guilt, and your wallet pays the price. This isn't about guilt. This is about getting honest. Because until you deal with the emotional drivers behind your spending, you'll never truly step into stewardship. You'll just keep plugging holes in a leaking bucket, wondering why your harvest still feels empty. God didn't give you provision just to medicate your moods. He gave you provision to build, to bless, to multiply, and really to create peace for your household and margin for your mission. But honestly, to use it right, you have to stop letting your emotions hold the steering wheel. So let's ask the question most people avoid. Are you managing your money with wisdom, or are you managing your feelings with money? Because when you try to fix everything at once and buy everything you feel, you end up chasing a version of success that was never part of your purpose. Let's talk about why you can't prioritize everything and how that one shift could unlock the financial peace you've been praying for. Let me just say it as it is. You can't do it all, not if you want to build wealth, not if you want financial peace, not if you're serious about stewardship. You can't be a travel junkie, a sneakerhead, a foodie, a tech collector, a luxury car lover, and still expect to build financial freedom. Something has to give. Because money is limited, but desires are not. And this is where most people, even well-meaning Christians, go wrong. They confuse income with capacity. They think just because they can technically afford something, they should have it. So they stretch, they swipe. They compromise their margin just to keep all the plates spinning. But here's the truth. A real budget isn't a punishment. It's a mirror. It doesn't just show you how much you earn. It shows you what you value. Your spreadsheet reveals your priorities more honestly than your prayer life does. The book of Matthew, chapter 6, verse 21 says, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." So really the question isn't, can I afford it? It's, is this aligned with what God has called me to build? Because you're not just spending money, you're casting votes for the future you're creating. And listen, this isn't about deprivation, it's about direction. It's not that you can't enjoy nice things, it's that you can't prioritize all of them at the same time and expect to get ahead, so choose. If travel lights your fire, budget for it, but sacrifice elsewhere. If you love great food, go for it, but don't also try to live in a luxury high-rise, upgrade your car every 2 years, and shop every weekend. You have to pick what truly brings life, not what just looks good online. Because if everything is a priority, nothing is. God doesn't bless chaos, he blesses order. You don't need a miracle, you need a plan. Let all things be done decently and in order. And here's the twist, you can be making six figures doing all the right things and still feel like you're behind. How? Because there's a difference between what you earn and what you own. Let's talk about the folks who look rich, but their net worth tells a very different story. Making more money doesn't mean you're getting richer. Many people earn well but owe even more. Net worth equals what you own minus what you owe. If you don't track it, you're building blind. Here's one of the biggest traps in modern financial life, and it's snatching up believers left and right, looking rich, while secretly drowning. We live in a culture that celebrates income, but ignores net worth. People brag about what they make, not what they keep. You could be making more money than ever and still be net poor. Why? Because income is loud. Net worth is quiet. Net worth is the full picture, what you own minus what you owe. If you don't know that number, you're building blind, you're stacking bricks with no blueprint. Busy, impressive, exhausted, but no clarity, no progress, no foundation, and that's dangerous. Proverbs 27 verses 23 to 24 says, "Be sure you know the condition of your flocks, give careful attention to your herds, for riches do not endure forever." In Bible times, flocks and herds were the measure of wealth. Today it's your assets, your equity, your savings, your investments. And the scripture says, pay attention, because wealth doesn't stick around just because you're making more. If you're not managing it, tracking it, multiplying it, it will leak quietly, consistently, completely. Even Joseph saved in seasons of plenty. The wise prepare, the unwise spend like every day will be sunny. Proverbs chapter 6 from verse 6 to 8 says this, "Learn from the ants, they store up food for the winter." So here's the wake-up call. Making six figures isn't the goal. Keeping and growing what you make, that's the mark of true stewardship. Let's expose a hidden trap that keeps even high-earning believers feeling broke: your zip code. You can be doing everything right. You budget, you save, you hustle. But the second that direct deposit hits, it disappears. Not because you're reckless, but because your location is draining your wealth. This is what we call zip code poverty. You're not broke by income, you're broke by geography. Living in places like Sydney, New York, or Los Angeles doesn't just cost more, it demands more. You're paying $3,500 in rent just to be near opportunity. You spend $200 a week on groceries that would have cost $80 somewhere else. You swipe $800 monthly on your car because everyone drives nice here. And the worst part? You don't even realize you're poor because you feel successful. You look around and everyone's doing the same thing: maxed out lifestyles, constant upgrades, pressure to keep up appearances. So instead of building wealth, you're maintaining status. Instead of financial peace, you're trapped in financial performance. And here's the danger for Christians. We spiritualize it. We say, God has planted me here. But what if God didn't plant you? Your pride did. What if you're holding on to a postcode that's slowly choking your financial future just because it looks impressive? 1 Timothy 6 verse 6 says, "But godliness with contentment is great gain." God never said success had to come with stress. You don't need a flashy address to prove you're blessed. Sometimes wisdom means leaving the image so you can reclaim the margin, because where you live should serve your purpose, not sabotage your peace. And no, I'm not saying God can't bless you in expensive cities. He absolutely can. But if your zip code is keeping you in survival mode, you need to stop asking, how can I make this work? And start asking, God, is this even where you called me to be? Here's the plot twist nobody tells you. Feeling rich is a mindset, not a number. Paul said in Philippians 4 verse 12 that he learned how to be content whether he had a lot or a little. That's the secret. Contentment, not comparison. You can hustle, you can earn, you can chase every upgrade, but if you never learn gratitude, you'll never feel wealthy, even with $1 million in the bank. Gratitude will make you feel rich long before your salary ever does. It flips the script. Suddenly, the apartment you thought was too small becomes a haven. The car you drive is no longer a status symbol, but a blessing. The meals you share, the moments you savor, they become proof that you're already living in abundance. So ask yourself, are you counting dollars or counting blessings? Because true wealth isn't found in your zip code, it's found in your mindset. The trade-off is yours to choose: peace or pressure, wisdom or impulse, future or now. God has given you the power to choose, but every choice has a cost. Deuteronomy 30 verse 19 says, "I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life." You don't have to wait until you're rich to live with peace. God's promise isn't tied to your paycheck, it's tied to your priorities. Start aligning your money with His wisdom, not the world's patterns, because the hamster wheel was never God's will. Peace is. If you got value from this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below.